Everything around the Pittsburgh Steelers changed the moment the news became official. Nick Herbig has agreed to a massive contract extension that keeps him in Pittsburgh for the foreseeable future. And this move tells us far more than just the organization rewarding a talented player. It gives us a direct look into how the Steelers are planning their future and what they believe this defense will look like over the next several seasons. The reported extension is worth 4 years and $100 million, with significant guaranteed money included in the agreement. When you combine that extension with the remaining year already on his current deal, the Steelers have effectively secured Herbig's services for the next 5 seasons. That is a major commitment from the front office, and one that immediately sends a message throughout the entire locker room. The reason this move is so important is because Nick Herbig has earned it through his production. Despite not being a full-time starter, and despite dealing with injuries during the season, he still managed to record 7.5 sacks. What makes that number even more impressive is the fact that he accomplished it while playing fewer snaps than many other high-profile edge rushers around the league. Every time he stepped on the field, he found ways to pressure quarterbacks and create disruption. That efficiency is exactly what the Steelers are betting on. They are not paying Herbig for what he has already done. They are paying him for what they believe he is about to become. The extension strongly suggests that the organization views him as a future full-time starter. Even if his role remains similar this season, the long-term vision appears clear. The Steelers see Herbig as a foundational piece of their defense moving forward, and they are making that investment now before his value potentially climbs even higher. Another fascinating aspect of this development is what it means for the overall structure of Pittsburgh's pass rush. For years, Steelers fans have enjoyed watching TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig operate together as one of the deepest edge rushing groups in football. That trio has created matchup nightmares for opposing offenses whenever all 3 players are healthy. The expectation now is that Steelers fans will continue to see plenty of those 3 defenders on the field together, especially in obvious passing situations. The so-called NASCAR package becomes even more intriguing with Herbig locked into the franchise's future plans. Having 3 explosive pass rushers attacking quarterbacks from different angles creates endless possibilities for defensive creativity. The timing of the extension also matters. By getting the deal completed now, Pittsburgh avoids a potentially complicated contract situation down the road. Instead of allowing Herbig's market value to continue rising, the Steelers acted aggressively and secured the player before he reached another level of production. From the organization's perspective, this is the type of move that reflects confidence. They did not wait for another breakout season. They did not wait for a bidding war. They made a decision and committed to a player they believe will become one of the cornerstones of the defense. What makes the situation even more interesting is the ripple effect it could have on the rest of the edge rusher room. If Herbig is now being compensated like a major long-term piece, eventually the Steelers will have difficult decisions to make regarding snap distribution, future contracts, and roster construction. Those questions do not necessarily need answers today, but they are impossible to ignore after a deal of this magnitude. For now, though, the biggest takeaway is simple. The Steelers have identified Nick Herbig as a player they want representing this defense for years to come. They believe his speed, his ability to get after the quarterback, and his continued development justify one of the most significant investments the franchise has made in a young defender. And if the Steelers are right about Herbig's trajectory, this contract could eventually look like one of the smartest decisions the front office has made in recent years. But that leads to the biggest question of all. Does this extension signal the beginning of a new era for Pittsburgh's pass rush, with Nick Herbig preparing to take on an even bigger role than Steelers fans have seen so far? The more you analyze this extension, the more it becomes clear that the Steelers are not simply rewarding production. They are positioning themselves for what comes next, and that future could have major implications for one of the most important position groups on the entire roster. For all the excitement surrounding Nick Herbig's new contract, there is another reality that Steelers fans cannot ignore. The edge rusher room is now becoming increasingly expensive, and eventually Pittsburgh will have to make choices. That is the reality of the NFL salary cap, even for organizations that traditionally do an outstanding job managing their roster. Right now, Steelers fans can still enjoy the luxury of having TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig together. Few teams in football can rotate pass rushers with that kind of talent and depth. When all 3 are healthy, offensive coordinators are forced to account for pressure coming from every direction. It changes protection schemes, affects quarterback timing, and creates opportunities for the entire defense. The expectation is that Pittsburgh will continue utilizing all three players heavily this season, particularly in passing situations. Those NASCAR packages have already shown flashes of how dangerous they can be. Whenever offenses find themselves in second and long, third and medium, or third and long situations, the Steelers have the ability to unleash multiple edge rushers simultaneously. That is where Herbig becomes especially dangerous. His explosiveness off the snap allows him to create pressure quickly, and because opposing offenses already devote so much attention to Watt and Highsmith, Herbig frequently finds favorable opportunities. The Steelers understand that. More importantly, they appear convinced that he can handle a much larger workload in the future. That belief is likely one of the biggest reasons this extension happened now. The organization clearly does not view Herbig as merely a rotational player anymore. Players do not receive contracts of this magnitude unless teams see them as future cornerstones. Every indication points toward Pittsburgh viewing him as a long-term starter and a major piece of the defensive identity moving forward. At the same time, this creates an interesting conversation regarding Alex Highsmith. There is absolutely no indication that Highsmith's time with the Steelers is ending immediately. In fact, the expectation remains that he will play a major role this season. When healthy, he has proven himself to be one of the most productive and reliable defenders on the roster. His impact against both the run and the pass has made him an essential component of the defense for years. However, football is often about planning ahead rather than reacting too late. As players get closer to new contract negotiations, front offices are forced to evaluate age, projected production, salary demands, and roster flexibility. Those factors become impossible to ignore when multiple star-caliber players occupy the same position group. That is why this Herbig extension feels so significant beyond the player himself. The Steelers have now made a substantial financial commitment to a 24-year-old pass rusher, whose best football may still be ahead of him. From a long-term perspective, that matters. It gives the organization security at one of the most valuable positions in football, while also allowing them to continue building around younger talent. Another important detail that should not be overlooked is the timing of the agreement itself. By finalizing the contract before training camp, Pittsburgh removes any uncertainty surrounding Herbig's status. There will be no distractions. There will be no prolonged negotiations hanging over the season. Instead, Herbig can focus entirely on football. That stability benefits both the player and the organization. It allows coaches to prepare for the season knowing exactly who will be available and how the future of the position group is shaping up. It also reflects positively on the front office. For years, the Steelers have built their reputation on identifying talent early and securing important players before contract situations become problematic. This move follows that same philosophy. Rather than waiting for another potentially dominant season and risking a much larger price tag later, they acted now. And if Herbig continues developing at the rate he has shown so far, there is a strong possibility that this contract will look like a bargain a few years from today. What makes all of this even more exciting for Steelers fans is that the immediate future remains intact. The possibility of watching Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig attack opposing quarterbacks together for another season should generate enormous excitement throughout Pittsburgh. Few defensive units possess that kind of pass-rushing firepower. The Steelers are betting that Herbig will become one of the next great defenders to carry the tradition of elite edge play in Pittsburgh. They have invested heavily in that belief, and now all eyes will be on how he responds once the season begins. If he takes the next step the organization expects, this extension could become one of the defining moves of the Steelers' defensive future. Another element that should not be overlooked is how smoothly this entire situation appears to have been handled by the organization. Too often around the NFL, major contract negotiations become public distractions. Speculation grows, frustrations build, and eventually both sides are forced to answer questions that have nothing to do with football. That does not appear to be the case here. By getting the extension completed when they did, the Steelers have effectively eliminated what could have become one of the biggest storylines of the summer. Instead of discussing contract uncertainty throughout training camp, coaches, players, and fans can focus entirely on preparing for the season. That may seem like a small detail, but inside an NFL building, stability matters. The fact that Herbig is expected to be fully available moving forward means the coaching staff can immediately begin implementing their plans without worrying about ongoing negotiations. Every practice rep, every meeting, and every installation period can now be focused on football rather than business. For a player who is expected to take on a larger role in the future, that continuity is valuable. What is particularly interesting is how much confidence this move demonstrates from the front office. The Steelers did not need to make this decision right now. They could have waited. They could have asked for another season of production action before committing such significant resources. Instead, they chose to act aggressively. That tells you everything you need to know about how highly they value Herbig's development. When organizations hand out contracts of this size, they are not simply evaluating statistics. They are evaluating work ethic, football intelligence, consistency, professionalism, and long-term potential. The Steelers clearly believe Herbig checks all of those boxes. That confidence becomes even more important when you consider the expectations that now come with the deal. The moment a player signs a major extension, the conversation changes. Fans no longer evaluate him as a promising young contributor. They evaluate him as a player expected to help lead the team. Fair or unfair, that is the reality. Herbig will now enter the season with greater expectations than ever before. Opposing offenses will prepare for him differently. Analysts will discuss him differently, fans will watch him differently, and based on everything the Steelers have shown through this extension, they believe he is ready for that challenge. The front office deserves credit for recognizing a player they believe can become a foundational piece and moving decisively to keep him in Pittsburgh. This is exactly the type of move that successful organizations attempt to make before a player's value reaches an even higher level. If Herbig delivers another productive season and continues progressing as a pass rusher, the Steelers could find themselves looking back at this agreement as one of the most important decisions they made during this period of roster construction. For now, though, the focus shifts back to the field. The contract is signed, the future is secure, the expectations are rising, and Steelers fans will soon get their first opportunity to see how this newly extended defender responds when the regular season begins. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you enjoyed this breakdown, and check out the next video on your screen for more Steelers coverage. And one final question for Steelers Nation. How many sacks do you think Nick Herbig can realistically produce this season now that the organization has made such a massive commitment to him? What may ultimately make this extension look even better for Pittsburgh is the age factor. The Steelers are not investing in a player who has already reached the later stages of his career. They are investing in a 24-year-old pass rusher who is still developing and who may not have reached his ceiling yet. That is a crucial distinction. Across the NFL, teams are constantly searching